Welcome to the Tokenomics DAO podcast, where we explore everything tokenomics related, ranging from deep dives on the tokenomics of the newest protocol to demystifying the nuance of building a successful token ecosystem. Our goal is to bring awareness to the importance of tokenomics and the crucial role it plays in defining the success of a protocol, helping make tokenomics relevant for everyone, builders and investors alike. I'm your host, Flo, joined by my co-hosts, Jason and or Lovis. Welcome to the podcast. So in this episode, we're going to talk about an article that we read about in-game currencies, and we're going to try and compare it to the real world because we thought this was really interesting. We're going to touch base on sources and sinks of the currency, so where currencies come from and how they get destroyed, the scarcity of currencies and how that impacts it, what real world sinks might be, like maybe taxes or how do you take money out of circulation in general. We talk a little bit about airline miles, supply caps in-game currencies seem to be a bad thing according to the article, but we don't think that is the case in the real world. And yeah, we talk about a two currency system for advanced players, also exists in the real world. And then I guess we finish it up with revolutions of countries or states are like in-game patches or expansion packs. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. In this podcast, we had to wait a little bit to get it started. And I hope it's worth it because Jason now is on full road equipment and you'll hear it. It's amazing. But I'll just let him do the intro.
Hi guys. How does road sound?
So much better than your AirPods.
What's not better than the AirPods, Flo?
True.
So background for today's episode, right? I don't know if you guys are subscribed to Flo's Tokenomics style newsletter, but I am. And he told me, hey, there's this article that you should check out. It's on in-game currencies. And we were speaking to a prospective client who was maybe needing our help as well with this, right? So I was reading this article, and while I was reading it, it was a pretty long article. Like, I don't know, it took me maybe 20 minutes to get through the whole thing. And the whole time I was getting goosebumps, right? And I was like screenshotting Flo while reading this article saying like, oh my gosh, this has so many parallels to the real world. And for me, it was such a cool thing because while the author was talking about economic systems in game, for me, this was such a interesting sort of view or gave insight into how economic systems work, because while it was a game, the people that were, or the actors within the game were not theoretical. They were real people with real incentives, right? Trying to compete to get to the top of a certain game, right? And there are millions or hundreds of thousands of people interacting through currency systems, right? Inside an ecosystem in a game. And it was interesting because right at the top, the preface was almost like, hey, all currency systems fail. Like, give it enough time, they will fail. And the point is to understand that. And here's some pointers we can give, right, in game design, currency design, to kind of extend the life of a currency system. And
so I think the author, right, he's like a game designer, he said, or something like that. Like games. He didn't mention which games, but he designs the economics within the games for a living. And so I thought also that was pretty cool quote in saying like
he's like a central
they all fail.
He's like a central banker for games, right? Like you can get hired to go and design systems for games, Like, hey, do you want to be Jerome Powell for World of Warcraft 4?
The Jerome Powell from World of Warcraft. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to be a sorcerer or warrior?
I'll be Jay Powell.
Yeah. So I just thought would be cool to, because Flo and I and Lovis, we've been talking about these things, not in-game currencies, but our currency systems on the whole, right? For years now. And I just thought, hey, Flo, would it be cool if we could get together to just go through some of these points and see maybe what the real world analogs are, or if the games are the game in-game currencies are the analogs for the real world, right? um Too bad with the time difference, because I'm in Germany at the moment, Flo's in Sydney, and I think Lovis is in Dallas, so we couldn't get all three of us in the same spot. But yeah, that's what today's episode's probably going to be roughly about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me the first, before all the other pins to drop, right, and all the other insightful uh, design elements that was put into place, the first thing that really hit me like a ton of bricks is that he said, "Hey, all currencies fail, right? It's just a matter of time. You have all these people coming in, players coming in, creating gold through whatever the currency is. Let's just say gold, right? Getting gold coins from killing monsters. So you're just gonna have this inflating currency supply, and there's not much you can try to slow that down, but at the end of the day, it's just too many.
And he actually calls that
Gold.
like sources and sinks, right? So he goes and says, well,
Mm-hmm.
there's these sources, and in a lot of games like maybe Diablo or World of Warcraft, you kill monsters and then you gain these coins all the time, and all the players do it all the time, and so you get them. And then I guess like with them becoming more powerful at doing that, they just amass like a ton of these gold coins. So you have this inflating currency. And so to fight that, he talks about this concept of sinks, where stuff that takes money out of circulation again. So that would be maybe like taxes on certain things, or they also had this, I guess, in World of Warcraft specifically, when you died, your armor lost like its quality, and so after it was like completely damaged, you had to repair it, and then it cost gold. So like I think there's many different mechanisms of sort of like sinks
Right,
on
right,
how to
right.
get
So
the
that's the
money
way
out
to
again.
sink it. Yeah.
Yeah. So these sources and
Yeah.
sinks,
So
right?
if you, yeah, so like when the money goes into a sink, they get destroyed, right? So if you can think about it in terms of money's creation through killing monsters, then you think about it as money getting destroyed when it goes into one of these sinks. Flo's trying really hard to remember what he was doing with his fifth account.
I sold
His
it on
fifth
eBay.
World of Warcraft account. Yeah. So I've only, for like this MMO games, I've only played one or two, maybe three, right? So I don't have huge experience, but I guess hopefully some of our listeners do, or Flo does. And so maybe you will remember that, the time when you maybe didn't log in a month or two, and then you go back and all the items that you were used to buying at a certain price has gone up. Or yeah, maybe you go to an auction house and you realize they've now put in a massive tax when you want to trade items. That's also another sink that the article talked about. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like the main thing is really because I mean, these in-game economies, you can have prices be going up, but it's the point that he also makes is that through this, you getting these coins all the time, you have so many of them that they just completely lose their value and their status and anything in game. So you come in. So when you start the game, you're really interested about these and getting more of them. But then once you mature and have played the game a while longer, it like completely moves to the side. You don't care about that anymore.
Yeah. And then they talk about how then the economy, this totally separate from what the game designers were trying to do, right? The economy, the players within this economic system start to migrate to other forms of payment, right? Like I can't remember what was the example they used in Diablo 2, like stones of Jordan, was it? Like instead of people using gold, they would go towards something else that's way more expensive, just because when everything scarce, yeah. So you trade, I don't know how much gold to get this other really rare item, and then this rare item became the new coin of the realm, right? It was like, now it's this thing's like the thing you use to buy coffee with, just because, yeah. And it just reminds us, right, all these points of how that works in the real world as well. I don't know if people remember during, I guess no one's remembering what happened during Weimar, but you remember what happened during Zimbabwe? I don't know, we might have some 155-year-old listening in, but like in Zimbabwe, right, when the system collapsed, they quickly went towards commodities to trade. Like there were people doing like people started to run to the rivers to start panning for gold again, just to find these flecks of gold to use as things they could trade with, cigarettes, alcohol, right? Just anything that's more stable in its supply than currency.
Yeah, so like this stone of Jordan in Diablo, which would be the same thing, right? It'd be something scarce that others see as scarce as well, and that would immediately be then used for trade. So that could be gold, or yeah, other things like you said.
Yeah.
Maybe a watch.
Yeah, and then we sit here and we think about this crazy reality that we're facing in real life. Like, I could go into any Rolex shop in the world and I can't buy a Rolex, right? Because the guys are saying, yeah, we're all sold out. If you want the most normal date just, you need to get onto a waiting list and we'll contact you in like 6 months or a year. Rolex. I'm in Leipzig at the moment and I was just curious. So I went in and asked the guy. Leipzig is a small city in the northeast of Germany. And I went in and asked the dealer, like, hey, so you've got all these new Rolexes on display. He's like, yeah, but none of them are for sale. And I'm like, oh, okay. How much for not how much, how long do I have to wait if I put my name down, right? And he's like, depends which model. Some a year, some 15 years maybe. And he's saying it with a straight face and then giving a little smile at the side, right? Like, I guess they know themselves how ridiculous everything sounds, right? Like you walk into a shop and nothing's there. They have watches for display, but that's it. And they say something, they go and they say something like, oh, if you're a customer of ours for many years and you've bought many pieces already, timepieces already from us, then you're on the top of the list. If you're a newbie, then you need to like build your reputation with us by buying more watches first, maybe watches that no one wants. Yeah. And the interesting thing is for these watches that are on on a long waiting list, most of the time you're able to buy the watch, walk out the shop, and sell it for a huge profit, right? Like a big margin. And to me, that just tells you that, hey, something's going on, right? Like it's just like that in-game situation where the thing that people want is no longer money. They want to transfer that money into something else.
But here, I think, like specifically with Rolex, I think it's this: they engineer the scarcity, right? They go and they create that.
Yeah, they for sure the scarcity from the dealer's perspective. Let's say this time the auction house, right? If we want to have an in-game analog, they choose to control that supply in the hope of, you know, making it feel like their watches are scarce, right? But the point does remain though that when I go to any secondhand watch shop, right, there are hundreds of Rolexes there. So
Yeah.
there's enough supply there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the prices just keep going up, right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's become this like
And
object
it's
of
pretty,
speculation.
yeah.
And
Well, some people say that, right? I guess if you're really rich, it is that. But I don't know. I usually live in Singapore, and you take taxis pretty often in Singapore, right? It's cheap. They're everywhere. It's really easy to get around with a taxi when you need. Um, and you'd hear the taxi driver complain to you about the price of petrol or bread or rice or whatever, right? Telling you prices are going up, telling you that he's got a pretty tough life, the government sucks, right? That's usually the stand conversation, right?
I
In
remember that
Singaporean
too. Yeah.
taxis. Oh, the government's got so much money, and here we are, we can make ends meet, right? But a lot of them are rocking like these freaking Rolexes, right? And you ask them, and you go, "Oh, uncle, you know, times can't be that tough, right? Like you're wearing a watch that I can only dream of affording, right? How tough do I have it?" They tell you oftentimes that that's all their savings. You know, why put money in a bank, right? And let inflation kill you. They would tell you, yeah, I don't have much money, but I got this watch, and I can go to any pawn shop, PAWN, and get cash back at any time, right? I can use it as collateral, and it just keeps going up in value, you know?
Even though they wear it.
So yeah, yeah. Like my parents, when they got married, they bought themselves like a pair of Rolex watches, right? Like the most standard date just, you know, it's just the most standard Rolex watch. And my dad said he remembers paying something like $250 for it, something like that, right? For both one, I mean, 250 each. So my mom has one, my dad had one. And I went on the Rolex shop while I was here to just go and check how much that same model costs. And it's now 6,600 euros. Right?
Yeah.
And you can't buy it. You need to get on the waiting list. And it's the most standard watch, right?
So how much is it on the secondary market?
Depends. For that model, I think it's like a 20%, 30% markup from the new retail price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a poorly designed real world currency then.
Which, the Rolex or our dollars?
No, the money that's buying it.
Yeah, right. And then I'm currently in Germany, so everybody's talking about the energy crisis. Like I went for dinner at a friend's place last night, and he said, "Oh, it's crazy. When I first moved to Leipzig 10 years ago, a Döner, like a fast food, you know, like shaved barbecued meat
A
with
kebab, something. Yeah.
salad. Yeah, kebab. Yeah, right. Was €3 when I first came to Leipzig. Now it's 6. And we go downstairs and we see on the menu there, and it's like everything's stickered over, right? And it's actually 6.50 now. And he rolls his eyes, going like, "Fuck," right? We get home, I tell my wife, and my wife was born in Leipzig, right? And she said when she was at school, right, when the country first went onto the euro, she remembers it was a euro 50, right? So for her, it's 4x, right? But if you were to look at it in terms of price of gold, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think when the euro first went on when the euro first became a thing, I think it was like 150 to 200 euros per ounce of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the year 2000, right? And today it's about 1800 euros an ounce of gold. So yeah, the Döner's gone up in terms of euros, but gold's gone up more, right? So if you had earned your money in a stable currency, or or saved in a stable currency, like actually these things wouldn't be that expensive. The
You'd still be
housing,
paying the same for a doner.
or less, because the Döner's gone up 4x, but gold's gone up 8 or 9x, right? The Döner's half price now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? Do we need more sinks, more sources, fewer?
Yeah, so okay, we'll just go
What can
through a
we
few of
learn
the
from
sinks,
in-game?
right?
Yeah.
In game, because I was struggling to think about what our real sinks are, you know, because when we look in game, right, the sinks that they have, like they talk about, a few of them would be auction house fees, right? So every time you go and buy something, they take a certain amount of that money away.
A tax, yeah.
Every time you trade, yeah, with between players, sometimes they take money away. So for that, there's something kind of similar in the real world, in like goods and services taxes, right? Like in Singapore, there's 7%. In Europe, some places have it above 20%. I think in Germany it's 19. But and then you have other things as well, like you have like stamp duties whenever you buy a house, right? Whenever you buy a flat, you need to pay like 10% tax just to change the the name on the title deed, right? But in game, that money gets destroyed, that currency gets destroyed.
Exactly, yeah.
But for us, it doesn't, right? Like that money goes to the government, who then spends it again. So it's not a true currency sink.
Yeah.
The same with property taxes or guild dues, right? In game, you might need to pay property taxes. You might, if you join a guild in game, you might need to pay that. And in real life, you have those things as well. But
it goes
they're
to
not true
goes
sinks.
to the government, and then they can spend it. Yeah, it's income for them.
Yeah. And if we were to like classically look at government balance sheets, right? And if they were to use this to say, oh, we're collecting more taxes, so we've got a fiscal surplus, so we're going to reduce our debt, then yes, then that would be a true currency sink. But no countries ever do that. Or they haven't done it in a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
Like even now, with all the mayhem going around with governments trying to, or central banks trying to raise interest rates, like if you look at the balance sheet of the Fed, right, everybody's making a big deal about them doing quantitative tightening, right? But it's like you need a magnifying glass to just see if that balance sheet is actually coming down a little bit, right? You need to zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. It's kind of like tiny amounts, and now everybody's talking about the world economy crashing because they're doing that.
This tiny little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
So
that's because they've run it up so long. So everybody's become addicted to getting more and more money. And now
yeah,
it's, yeah. now you've got this problem, right? How do you get them off of it? But maybe if they wouldn't have
Yeah.
done this more and more money and would have like constantly put some of that surplus into paying off debt, it would have never come to that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think so, because a lot of these things, right, like the property taxes that we have, or Flo, maybe you'd know better with the whole Meister sort of thing you need in Germany before you're allowed to do stuff. Like I hear somebody's sister needs to get a Meister to be a head, this level of training that you need to go through and pay a lot of money and spend a lot of time before you get this accreditation to say that you're good enough to be like a hairdresser. So until you get that, you're always going to be paid like nearly minimum wage. And then once you get this Meister level, you're then allowed to have your own shop,
Business.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
start a
Train
business, which
new people. Yeah.
for me as a Singaporean, that's like, it blows my mind, right? Like that to do something so basic like cutting hair for somebody else, you need to go through this to get this. I guess it's something like a guild, right? You need to pay your guild dues before you're allowed to make money from this trade, right?
Yeah.
And in Singapore, it's more like, hey, if you're good enough, you can cut someone's hair like outside your house, right? And if you're good enough, people are gonna like be queuing up to get a haircut from you, and you're gonna get enough money to then start your shop, and then off you go, right?
The government's not involved in that.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I would say, I guess this is a tradition in Germany now for many, many years, right? It predates this, let's say, this fiscal irresponsibility or that we're seeing from central banks. So maybe in the past it did serve as a currency sink, right? These property taxes, these guild dues, when the time when we were, let's say back in the 60s 50s, when let's say the Bundesbank was really trying to run a tight ship and not be in debt,
Mm-hmm.
it's just that these systems kept perpetuating even though the macro environment shifted and everyone was like, hey, free money, let's print money, right? No worries, we'll give everyone this, vote for me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And yeah, that's true. And there's nothing enforcing it, right? I think I was just kind of thinking like if there was something like a piece of code that would be executed automatically that says, oh, if you have a surplus, then 50% of that goes to debt reduction automatically, and you can't do anything about it, or something like that, right? So then that you did not have the option at all to go and say, oh, come on, we'll do that next year. This year, we're going to give everybody some flood relief or something. We're going to pay every Australian that was impacted or claims he was impacted by the floods. We're going to all pay them like $2,000. That's what's happening now here. So
yeah,
you can just
yeah,
go there and get it. Or like with COVID, everybody who, I don't know, had something going on with their job, they would immediately get like a ton of money from the government.
yeah.
And you do that instead of that. So I think if there was something programmable that would do that automatically, maybe that would stop that to a certain degree, where they would take money out of circulation. There would be a sink, right? Would implement a real sink, because it is, yeah, like you said, it's kind of up to the mood of the current government. So maybe in the 60s, the German government did that. Now they don't seem to do that.
Yeah. And so for me, when I'm reading this article, I'm so intrigued, right? Because it feels like we're watching this. It's almost like we are in real life in one of these systems right now where there are too many sources and nearly no sinks. And
Yeah.
and since we know how that ends in game, in every single game, and how every game's trying so hard to put these sinks in place and yet still struggle to keep the currency system alive, what more for us with no sinks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all gonna crash. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, like he doesn't have any good suggestions for doing that aside from right. So he basically says the same thing about games. He says like it's really hard. You can create these things and try to um, extend the time until it crashes, but he then also talks about using different currencies, different assets, right?
Yeah.
So
That
like
that was
more
also for
scarce
me
ones,
very
yeah.
interesting. He said if everyone uses one currency, right? If one currency can do everything, like one currency can pay for you to travel between worlds, if one currency can pay for you to buy items, if one currency can pay for you to get information from some is it NPC?
Yeah, yeah.
What some yeah, right. Um, then in those circumstances, in those cases, the currency dies way quicker. And he said, if we were to say you need different currencies for different actions, then certain parts of or certain currency systems fail, but then they're isolated from the whole game ecosystem, right? So you might have the currency system failing for paying NPCs, but then the game designers would then tweak stuff to keep the game alive because it's just one aspect of the game that's struggling a bit, and they'll be able to ring fence that problem and not let the whole currency system die, if that makes sense,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, and in the real world,
And
you'd have
from
different currencies too, right? So if you see the euro failing, you could buy US dollars.
exactly, and that's why there's this, to me, that's why there's legal tender, right? Like when you're in country X, you have to use the currencies that were, created by country X. And like, let's say now Sri Lanka fails, then what happens? Everybody ring fences Sri Lanka. Whichever banks had exposure to Sri Lankan debt, they might get bailed out. Sri Lanka starts a new currency system. But overall, the whole global, you know, SWIFT, Federal Reserve, ECB, whatever system still works, which
Yeah,
so
because they're all
cool when you
isolated
read it, right?
currencies, like in
You're like,
game, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So in Diablo, yeah, if the
So
gold
I thought
doesn't
that
work
was also
anymore,
interesting.
move to the Stone of Jordan or some other thing, right? Yeah. So in a way, that's what people then
Yeah.
do. They
Yeah.
they yeah they move to something like maybe gold um to hold that, or a different currency of a different country altogether.
Yeah. So I watched there's another YouTube video that I watched that was pretty cool. It's called MMO economies, hyperinflation, reserve currencies, and the like, right? And
Mm.
we'll put it in the show notes. It was really cool video to watch. It was only, I think, 12 minutes, and was done in a pretty fun, fun way, not too heavy. Um, and one of the strategies that a lot of games are using now is called like reserve currencies, right? So what you can do is, say, imagine you are playing a multiplayer game in the world of Mario, right? Like Nintendo's world, right? You'd run around doing whatever quests and interact with other players, and you'd make tons of, let's say, gold, right? The gold rings that you collect as you go through Mario World. But as that gets too, as the amount of currency gets too high, what they will allow you to do in this model would be to trade that gold for something else, like maybe for diamonds, right? And then what you can do with these diamonds is you can only use diamonds to purchase stuff outside the game world. So you
Or
might
like a
be able to
different part
use
of the
these
game, right?
diamonds to go and buy like a Super Mario t-shirt, but they're talking about actually just outside the game world totally. So that way the currency
Yeah.
really dies, right? Because you're bidding for products or services that do not exist in the game world, if that makes sense.
Is that then a
Right.
sink?
So it's a sink because the currency dies without it bidding for anything, you know?
But it still takes it out of circulation because you swap it for another currency.
Yeah, exactly. But the diamonds can't be used in game. So
Yeah.
there's no currency inflation in game. The currency
Yeah.
goes down in terms of supply. And then the players are happy to do that trade because they get something for it, right?
Yeah.
They don't feel taxed in a way because they go, hey, I can either go and buy a Super Mario t-shirt from Nintendo, or if I'm super good, I can get a new Wii or Switch from
Yeah.
the Nintendo store. Or I can even get money, right? I can even get real world US dollars or euros or Japanese yen, because I can then take these diamonds and sell it to somebody and go, hey, instead of paying to buy your Nintendo 64 2022 version, just send me the money, I'll send you the diamonds, and you can get it cheaper than retail, right? And so suddenly there's another economy out there which acts as a sink for the in-game economy. I thought that was pretty interesting.
What would that be in the real world? Is there something?
Sometimes you see that, like, with your air miles, you can buy stuff that's not tickets. You can use
Oh
the
yeah.
miles for
Yeah.
something else. You can buy like a suitcase or whatever from the Lufthansa store. I guess when you have this backlog of miles, right, that the airlines have, they don't want they make your miles expire, right? In a way, that's a tax, that's a sink. So you
Yeah.
have to spend it now. But if everyone spends it now, it also doesn't do anything to help them, right? Because you got not enough tickets, maybe, or then the company doesn't get enough revenue because everybody's not paying cash, they're paying with miles. So there might be. I don't understand the airline miles economics, microeconomics well enough to understand why they want to do that, right? To let you use the miles to buy food. Like in Singapore with KrisFlyer, the miles, right? You can buy so many things now. They've got a separate website that just for you to spend your KrisFlyer miles, right?
Yeah.
It's not even on the Singapore Airlines website anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess they buy this stuff and they just sell it for a higher price. I've just seen this, there's like websites where you can convert sort of like how much would be the dollar equivalent of a mile, and they calculate that per item. So then if you have these airline miles and you spend them on something like upgrades or long haul flights, that's where you get the most dollar value out of your mile. And the worst thing you can do is buy a frying pan for airline miles, because it's just such a cheap item. They buy it in bulk and then they sell it to you for a lot more.
Yeah.
Then would it be worse? I think I could see them making money with that, because it's a very indirect way, but they the people save up these miles, right? So that's sort of a loyalty program, right? They fly with Qantas instead of Singapore Airlines and collect them, right? So that gets people to fly with you. That's the mechanism. And then these miles, I don't know. Does it really act as a sink though then? Because I mean, they've created the currency, the mile currency. Yeah, and then they take it out of circulation. Yeah. By doing that.
I think because when the companies go ahead, right, and do the shareholder presentations quarterly, right, they actually have the miles are actually a liability for them, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like
They owe.
services that they owe, right? So they
Yeah.
need a way to get that number down sometimes. And it was a huge problem with COVID because everyone was still getting their miles from spending credit card, credit card dollars, right? Which would earn them miles, but there was no way for them. People couldn't fly for 2 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Flo, you were asking about any real world examples of these reserve currencies. So that what I brought up, that flight miles, right? Air miles, it's one thing. But if you wanted a more, let's say, hard hitting, impactful sort of reserve currency, you would say like something like gold or Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, right? It's like, because when you take your fiat, that fiat can buy anything in your world, right? It's the medium of exchange in your world. It might not be the medium of exchange once you go to another world, say another country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in your country, you need to spend only that fiat currency, right? But what you can do is say, hey, I'm going to transfer that money and go and buy gold, because this gold, I can't use it to pay for my McDonald's meal in Berlin, right? But it allows me to then go to another world and then exchange that gold again for whatever that local currency is, or it allows me to sidestep whatever hyperinflation or hyperdeflation is happening, right? So in that way, it's like a currency that's outside your in-game currency, or in real life, it's outside your fiat currency. But again, this doesn't act as a currency sink, right? Because in the Nintendo example, that currency goes to Nintendo. Whenever you swap it for diamonds, that those gold rings die, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But in Germany, let's say, or in Singapore, in Australia, when I go and put 2,000 euros on the desk and say, hey, give me a gold coin, that 2,000 euros doesn't die.
Yeah.
Right.
It just goes to the guy who sold it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that gold goes out of the country, then and that happens on a large scale, then there's a problem, right? Because then there's more and more currency units in that game or in that system, with less and less goods backing that currency, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one reason why they really don't like it when you like the Panama Papers. Why is it that when people read about the Panama Papers, everybody goes like, oh my God, all these leaders, they're putting money somewhere else, right? Well, the question is, why are they doing that, and why does the system not want them to do that? Like, why doesn't the system allow for every person that's a baker, a plumber, whatever, to have a bank account in another country with lower taxes? Why is that only something that the rich can do or does?
Yeah, I think like because it's probably capital intensive to do it in the first place. So there's always this, where it becomes profitable to do it. Because if you're sending 10 million overseas and you need to pay 100,000 a year for a lawyer, then that might start to make sense. But if you only have 1 million and you pay 100,000 for a lawyer, that's not a good thing to do every year, unless you, of course, make 10% or 11.
Yeah.
So you can keep one tax-free.
Actually, if you've got 10 million, 100 grand is only 1%. So it's easy.
Yeah, in that case, yeah.
And so let's say we were to use gaming terminology, right? This would be like a different kind of coin, right? The Panama coin that you only use end game, right? You only get access to that when you've got so many gold rings that you're then able to pay whatever that extra is to then transact and transfer your money, your gold rings into Panama coins, right? And the guy in both the article and the video talks about that, where another way to keep the currency system alive is to, at the end of the game, allow for new currencies to come into being that allow you to do things only if you have this new currency. So it's
Yeah.
only for mature players, right, that are
Yeah, yeah.
very high up the ladder, like it's a raid coin, right? You can only do these raids if you've got this raid coin, and you can only get this raid coin if you've got X number of hours played or something like that. And in a way,
reached a certain level. Yeah.
and isn't that nuts? Because every one of us that's working for a job, we're faced with this thing where we're going like, hey, we need, how much salary can I get? Oh yeah, man, I've got such a good job now. They're going to double my salary. I'm going to get like 200 grand a year now. Woohoo, right? But that's still just gold rings, right? Whereas the dudes that are controlling the world economy, like bidding for stuff, deciding whether they should lend money to countries at war, whatever, right? These guys, they need raid coins before they get there. And
they're so advanced.
There's no
or so rich
yeah.
in that case. So they're using a completely different currency system in this case. So they're using assets probably, right?
Yeah.
And like also different methodologies to do this like tax kind of stuff that we talked about, right? But in the first place, I think they're just using different coins altogether, right?
Yeah. And man, when you start thinking about things in that paradigm, it gets a bit sick. Like you think, okay, say now I'm starting a new account on World of Warcraft 5, whatever, and I'm playing it. How much do I need to play before I can become the game designer?
Well, that doesn't work that way, but yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't, right? It doesn't. And but the sad thing is for us that if we'll just say going through the standard procedure to go get a good job, get a salary, save that money, invest it well, the chances of you being able to decide on how the global financial system works is nearly zero as well, right? Unless you get to the point where you are a Bill Gates or something, and maybe, or George Soros, then maybe you get invited into these inner circles to discuss, hey, like
What
if
should
you
we
were
do?
John Maynard, if you were John Maynard Keynes, right, after the First World War, or the Second World War, right? Sorry, Second World War, yeah.
You kind of get invited to that stuff,
yeah, but you have to show a certain amount of like how many people can get there, really, so for most of us, we're just having to use these currency systems that certain powers that be decide on, right?
I mean, to a certain degree, yes, but we can also use we can also move to different currencies.
And maybe that's why things like Bitcoin and gold are so, empowering, right?
Yeah, because you can move to that other currency system. You can move to that like leveled up currency system, right? You can move to the raid coin. You can move from gold to the raid coin. Move from Australian dollars to gold or Bitcoin.
Or some Web3 tokens, right? And that might be why Web3 is so, or DeFi is getting so much pushback, because to some extent you're taking that power away from the game designers. You're finding a way to be playing World of Warcraft, and you're finding a way to go, I'm gonna put this virus into the game which allows every player to transact in stuff that's totally separate from the in-game currency that the game designers used, right? We're going to be able to interact with each other
or interact with it in a different game altogether, right? You can take it out and play, like use the coins in a different game. You're not really taking them, you're not really burning them, but what you're doing is you're taking them, out, using them in a different game.
Yeah.
And I think, like, okay, you could do, I mean, you could have done that 50 years ago, right? With it, you could have gone to the bank and you could have turned your fortune of $1 million Australian dollars, you could have turned that into US dollars 50 years ago, no problem, right? And then you could have taken that somewhere else. But I think, like, physically taking that on a plane and taking it over the border, there's always limitations for that, because obviously they wouldn't want that in too many cases. But yeah, this technology has made it so easy to do, right? You can, like, without anybody really, or it's quite hard to control, you could convert all your fiat currencies into something like that, like Bitcoin, and then move it to a different game country altogether, and then turn it back into their currency there.
Yeah. And do you think, if you were to spitball, like, what's the proportion of game participants right now that are doing that?
Trying to do that? Don't know.
I guess it's increasing, right?
I think, yeah. I'd say it's increasing. At least, like, the people who are paying attention, and given that this whole inflation stuff is now everywhere in mainstream media, everybody must have heard about it. And so then the next thing is like, okay, what do I do? Right? Do I just spend like crazy? Or do I put it in something else? And what would that be?
Yeah. But the point is, for the first time in a very long time, people are actually asking that question, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and you don't really need to ask it if the inflation is quite low. You can just run with it. You can just use the normal game currency, but only when I guess when the inflation is higher, then you need to move to that next level and use the higher game currency. Yeah.
Hey, pivoting a little bit, the another thing that I found really interesting with the article was, he said, one reason why the economic system design is so important is because it allows you to shape player behavior, right? So he's saying, if you want your game to have a vibe that's like, promote freedom of choice, the player gets this sort of self-expression, gets to develop the character in many different ways, right? There's no, let's say, strict script to follow. Then the currency should be allowed to buy many, many multitudes of things, right?
Yeah.
But if you want the player to follow a very strict, toe the line, sort of walk down this straight and narrow path, then you have to make sure the sources and sinks are very, very well defined and very, very few, right? So the player basically doesn't have much choice. He has to kill this monster, and he has to then spend it on this X to then kill the next monster. Like, there's no freedom, right? There's no leeway. And when I read that, I was like, damn, isn't that free market versus centrally planned, right? Like, when you go to Cuba and they tell you, hey, everybody's whatever, if you're a tobacco farmer or you make rum or whatever you do, you grow sugarcane, 80% of whatever goes to the state, right? And in return you get 20% left in money. And I'm not sure, because I only heard it from a friend. I've never been myself, but he was saying that the locals use a different currency from the tourists, right? Which is also nuts. But that just tells you how centrally planned it is, because the government really needs the actors, or the players in this case, to really have a well-defined role, right? That's it. That's what you're doing. You're growing tobacco, grow it, and give us 80% of that. And with that extra 20%, you get coupons to get your bread, or your fuel or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
and coupons, they are sinks, right? Because you only use them once, right?
yeah, correct. Or you could say they're currencies, but you can only trade them once, right?
Yeah.
And therefore they are a source and a sink straight away,
So it's
because
very,
you get
very
given it
narrowly
and then
defined.
it's gone. Yeah.
And you can, there's probably like,
So
you get food coupons and you can only use them for food. And then there's fuel ones, you can only use them for fuel. I don't know how that works, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then that's also to a more micro level, ensuring that the system doesn't explode, because then they can contain whatever errors happen, right? If there's a fuel shortage, it
Yeah.
doesn't affect the food. If
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
food shortage, it doesn't affect the fuel.
Yeah.
It's so crazy, right?
That like all this
Um,
stuff. I mean, of course, right? Like, where else would it come from if we're designing games? Like, where else would we get the ideas from for it, if not from the real world?
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you think they're getting it from the real world, or maybe these game designers, they've through empirical, you know,
Come to the same
iteration,
conclusion.
yeah, come to the same conclusion that, hey, human nature in game is the same as in real life, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, I'm not really sure if these 25-year-olds have gone and studied like what happened during the Great Depression, or what's happening in Cuba, North Korea,
The gamers not, but
whether
like,
they,
I could imagine these game designers,
yeah,
they would know.
yeah. We need to get one of them on the podcast.
Yeah, I'd like to get to know one of these guys. I think it's a really interesting field, and I think there also overlaps with tokenomics and um, a lot of other really interesting stuff one
Yeah.
could find out from one of these game designers. How would a game designer fix the real world problem?
At the end of that article, he does say something, right? He does say something that, hey, actually, the issue, the all these problems arise from the fact that the money supply isn't constant. If the money supply was constant, we would be able to, like, things would even out, right? Everything would get moderated just by design. But he said, and I don't know if I agree with him, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. He said, um, having a fixed money supply might not motivate players enough. And I'm wondering what that means, like, because I guess he's trying to say, like, you're not going to be able to affect player behavior enough.
If it's fixed,
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think
Wait,
the
let me
way
let me
he
find it
brings
and I'll
up that
read it
point
out.
is like, he says, well, there's multiple solutions, right, to solve, because he starts the article by saying, well, like the end of all these in-game currencies is like this hyperinflation, right? Because the players pick up all the stuff, so there's essentially more sources than sinks, and there's no way to really create more sinks, because otherwise the gameplay wouldn't be as fun. Stuff like that he talks about, and then he says he talks about some like mitigation strategies, I think, and then one of the mitigation strategies is to say that the currency is limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said, like, why don't you just put a cap on the currency? And then he
Mm-hmm.
says, if you do that, people would start hoarding the currency.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we see what they're doing with Bitcoin, and with other ones too, right? If it is limited and if it's scarce, that's what people tend to be doing, right? They just keep it. And so
But
that
I
also
don't.
kills the
Okay.
game playing.
But for me, right, that assumes that, okay, say you need this X to get to the next level, and you need to buy it and it costs 10 gold rings. But everyone else is hoarding the gold rings. So you can't get that 10 gold rings. And so you can't buy that X, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in real life, it doesn't work that way. In real life, if everyone's hoarding currency, the value of the currency goes up.
Yeah.
So then you need less of it to buy, right? If everyone's
yeah.
hoarding it, it's deflation. So then everything gets cheaper, right? Because just imagine if now gold, like 1 troy ounce of physical gold, right, is worth 1800 1700 US dollars, right? But let's say tomorrow, touch wood, the currency system fails. Nobody trusts paper currency anymore, and just empirically everybody goes, oh fuck, let's just use gold. And say now gold's worth $2 million because everybody wants it, right? Everybody's bidding for it. So I could now, everyone's still hoarding their gold, but now I don't need as much gold, right? I just need 1 ounce of gold buys me an apartment block, maybe, right? Instead of 1 ounce of gold buying me a nice suit. So I think maybe in this case he's talking about, in the game, but in real world, having a fixed money supply doesn't mean that prices stay the same, right? It just means prices can regulate, and the money itself can change in value according to what the market desires, right? I heard something where they were talking about Bitcoin, where I think Jeff Booth wrote a book. I can't remember the name of the book now, but he says, in the future, you won't borrow money anymore or it won't be this credit-based system as we have now, because if Bitcoin keeps going up in value, right, nobody's going to borrow Bitcoin, because it'd be better to just hold the Bitcoin, right? Like, why borrow Bitcoin and pay 3% interest on Bitcoin, but you can't get that? You can't make enough money from your business because Bitcoin is just going up so much. Right? Like let's just imagine this very theoretical situation where, let's say, Bitcoin goes up 20% a year, right? Linearly. Or in that case, it'd be exponential, but you get what I mean, right? Stable rate of increase. Who would borrow Bitcoin to go and like start a business? You can't pay it back, because if you don't get that money back within 3-4 years, you owe them double now, right?
If your business grows faster.
Yeah, exactly. So then you don't get this capital misallocation, because nobody would borrow money anymore. Everybody would go, unless I really, really, really know I'm going to double my money in 1 year, I'm not going to borrow money, right? But he says, if that's the case, nobody's going to borrow money to start businesses. Everybody's going to do like this equity model where they'll go, hey, we'll all start something, but we'll all put in money of our own to create something, and then we share whatever comes from it, right? Which is very different from a credit-based system. But again, that's, we're not talking about in-game anymore. We're just saying like why we think in-game having a fixed currency supply would not work, but it might work in the real world.
I can't get the thing where I can't find it, right, where he talks that through, like why he thinks
I
that
found it's under key 11. I can read it out if you like. He says, in this article, I never suggested what seems to be a very obvious solution: having a finite amount of currency. After all, this is one of the keys to a solid real-world economy. Oh, really? And why governments are so careful while printing more money. Oh, really?
Are they?
Well, unfortunately, this has been tried in some old school MMORPGs. One reason why the original Ultima Online economy failed, actually, and always led to the same situation. Players hoarding money combined with a lack of obligation to spend this money completely froze the economy and virtually removed it from the game world.
But then there
I'd
must be
love,
something else in the game design missing, right? That doesn't resemble the real world, because as you said, in a real world, that wouldn't happen.
I think in these games, they don't have a ability to lend money out. Because
Yeah.
if there's so much money there that everybody's saving, then there should be this ability for people to say, hey, I'm going to stake this money somewhere and get a yield, right? And if
Yeah.
that happens, then that money goes into the real world system or into the game system, sorry.
Yeah. And then can be used, or spent.
Yeah. Yeah. Because in let's say in the real world, right? If everyone's got money in a bunker somewhere,
Yeah.
it's costing them money, right? They need to pay somebody to secure that gold, right? Or they need to pay the banker to keep whatever upkeep systems going.
Yeah.
So actually they are spending money. That money does go into the economy somehow,
Yeah.
right? And if you're super efficient, yeah, okay, less money goes out, but still you're losing money every year. The only way you're gaining money is if you take that money out and put it at risk. And if you put it at risk, you might lose it, but you might gain more, right? And that's how an economy functions, right? Everyone's judging risk. I'm going to
Yeah.
risk my money to make more money. And if I
Yeah.
lose it, the other person gets the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I don't see the point when people talk about like a classical gold standard failing. I think the only issue with the classical gold standard is that they fix the price of gold, right? If they didn't fix the price of gold, gold would then be able to regulate things. But when you fix it, that's when you run into trouble, because then you're putting a hard stop on the transaction value between your own currencies and this thing that's a reserve currency. And that's why it fails.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that would be more close to the in-game currency design, right? Where like if the value, the
Exactly.
exchange value is fixed, then people will stop using it really.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're just talking about control, because the reason that they don't want you to be able to use gold to buy whatever you want to buy, you need to transfer or exchange that gold into Singapore dollars, euros, whatever, to buy what you need, right?
Yeah.
Because the moment everyone starts going onto this global currency standard where everyone uses the same currency, Bitcoin or gold or Ethereum or whatever, the control function that you have to control which way the game goes is gone, right?
Yeah.
There's no way
Yeah.
for you to control it anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Exactly. The game designer loses the power, right?
and this article talks about it, right? Like at the end, he says to have a good gaming experience, you need to have kind of like different currencies, right?
Yeah.
Running in parallel. And he always talks about these like renown tokens or raid tokens, or what we talked about just now with the Panama
Yeah.
coin, right? Like
Raid
at the
tokens, yeah.
start, that's useless, because
Yeah.
you don't even know you want these coins. But you get to
Yeah.
the end stage and you're like, OMG, there's a whole new world
Assets
out
are
there. The
everything.
whole
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
need.
Who wants yeah.
I want
And
salary. Yeah. I want ownership or something like that,
correct. And he says, hey, to get a player to join the game at the start, you need to be generous. So if he kills a little wild boar somewhere, right? He gets 2 gold rings, and you need to make him think that 2 gold rings are worth something. So you let him buy like a knife now instead of using a stick. And now
Yeah.
he can kill more boars really fast, right? But as you get to the end or the mid game, trying to earn gold by killing wild boars is boring, right? Because you need so much gold and you just can't kill that many. Like South Park has that episode, right, where they all go and they stay up for days and days and days killing boars.
Yeah, I think that's a
Anyway,
World of Warcraft analogy or something like that.
yeah, correct. Because they need, anyway, we'll put it in the show notes. But good episode, go watch it. But isn't that similar to real life, where they talk about, like, just think about it, right? We're 15 years old and an ice cream costs €3, and you're like, oh, if I wash my dad's car, he's gonna give me 10 euros, and I'm gonna be able to buy an ice cream and go to the movies, right? And that's like, oh, the best thing ever. But then as you get to mid game, you're like, oh, I need now 500,000 euros to think about owning a house, and my salary is like 50,000, and I need to spend so much on donors, right? Yeah. So then the reward function for earning goes down very quickly.
Yeah.
But they say that that's part of the game, right? Because they want to increase the difficulty so that people stay in the game and start to think about how I can, now I don't kill boars anymore. Now I need to go and hook up with that warrior.
Yeah.
And that, exactly, right? Which is maybe similar to us going like, hey, a salary is not going to be able to buy me what I want to buy. I just want my kids to go to home, own a car, go on a holiday once a year, and shit, my salary doesn't pay for that anymore. So what do? I go and call Flo and we say, hey, let's go start a DAO. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
But you start going with people that complement your skill set. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. But let's say we started a company, right? Like I'd go, hey, I need a CTO guy, I need a CEO guy, I need a marketing guy, right? I need different people with different skill sets to come together, and we'll go on raids, or we'll start this company and we'll go into the unknown, and we'll see what treasures and bounties we can get, right?
Yeah.
And it's so freaking similar, right? Like you need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this second currency gets introduced called ownership.
Yeah.
And you figure out, oh shit, salary wasn't the cool thing from the beginning. It's actually ownership.
Yeah. And they say that you get, in this article, he talks about renown tokens, right? Which is like these experience tokens. Yeah, raid tokens.
Yeah.
In the real world, it'd be something like reputation, it'd be something like experience, skill sets, right? Like if you were somebody that, you're now 40 years old, you've been in the economy, people in different countries, you've proven your skills to them, right? If you needed to start something now and you had a good network and you've got a good reputation, you get on the phone and you go, hey, Mr. XYZ with 500 times more money than me, I want to start this company. This is roughly what I want to do. I need $1 million to start it up. What do you think? Can you help me? Do you know somebody that can? Let's go, right?
Yeah.
And then you get that $1 million way quicker than if you had to save $10,000 a year, right? You'll never get there.
Yeah.
And
but wouldn't
like
so the second currency, wouldn't that be more resemble something like, I don't know, like you earn your salary or you earn your money with work, and the more advanced currency, you earn your money with capital and assets.
Yeah, capital, assets, or results, right?
Yeah.
Like, so in this case, if you had a raid token, you'd only earn money if you have, let's say, okay, with this raid token, right? And your account, when you say your ownership, you own all these massively good items. That's why you can go onto this raid and not get slaughtered, right? Because you have this axe of whatever, sword of whatever, right?
Yeah.
So is ownership. Then there's that skill level where you need to coordinate with everyone else on your team, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And I guess your experience points allow you to even do those things. And in real life, it is that combination of ownership, skill, and deciding how to allocate risk, right? Like,
Yeah, but I mean, they would also give you more yield, right? So you have all these items, and so in terms of gold coins, right? You don't. The reason why they don't have to worry about gold coins anymore is because they have all these amazing items, and they can go on these raids. They can team up with other people, and they just like together, because they have these big items and all that kind of stuff. They go out and they can kill monsters that yield 10x what the boar in the forest does. But
yeah,
they couldn't have done that without the assets that they have. So now they go out
yeah,
there and they earn like a lot more. And that's what I'm saying, right? Is that if you earn a salary, there's like a limit to that. But if somebody gave you 5 houses and said like,
yeah,
okay, take care of them, right? There's a lot more possibilities to grow that and to manage that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're in this like different
So
league, you're in this different currency realm then.
yeah,
Second currency, whatever.
so,
Yeah.
so let I mean, if I could, let's just you've played World of Warcraft way more than I have, I think. So if you think about it, the game designer did mention that that might be a problem, right? When some players get so good or so rich or so high up, right, that it doesn't entice them anymore to do anything,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't entice the newbies that come in because they go in and they think, oh, there's no way I can get to that level, right?
Yeah.
And in real life, there's some similarities there where people come in and go, oh, I've got no chance because my friends, their parents have given them 10 houses and they don't ever need to work. And here I am needing to go and get a job just to put food on the table. Like, it's just, it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense for me. I don't like the system. I'm going to start a revolution, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's a story like as old as time, right? Whenever there's this civilization and there's this system in place, you've got this Pareto's principle where the 20% get 80% of the resources, and then the top 2% get 80% of the top 20% of resources, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you were saying, maybe you can share like what happens when that they have a patch or they have an expansion, and what happens then in some of these games.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was they do this reset, right? So they bring out this new expansion, and then you might be like the biggest guy ever. You have like all these big items to go out and kill monsters and go on raids and that kind of stuff. And then they bring out this new expansion. And in that new expansion, the first quest that everybody does gives everybody, for like have to kill 10 monsters or something stupid. It gives everybody an item like an axe that is as good as that super rare one from the previous game. So like everybody gets in and the playing field is leveled immediately, right? Because
Yeah.
like it's not that, yeah, it might not be such a big difference. Like it might take another couple of quests to get there to the same level where these super advanced players were, but essentially it just levels the playing field really quickly in terms of
Yeah.
like what
And
everybody's
I
items are. Yeah.
and I guess we can say that we've seen that, right, in countries when there's a regime change or when there's a currency system reset or there's a revolution or etc etc.
Yeah.
Um, right? Because it doesn't matter if you own all the houses if suddenly everything gets nationalized. And I guess in a way that's what revolutions are about, right? To reset the ledger, to get everybody on a level playing field again.
Bring out this new
Um,
patch. Yeah.
yeah.
Extension pack.
The yeah. But the issue is in real life, right? It's not as tidy, like you go to this new world in your expansion pack and everything works, right?
Yeah.
But in real life, in our society, if you were to take ownership away from everyone, you're not sure if things will work. You can tell people, hey, this is a new rule. these are how the new systems work. Everybody's bank account now starts with 50,000 euros. Let's go. You don't
I mean,
know.
that's what happened in
Maybe some
Russia, right?
people,
Where they, after the Soviet
yeah.
Union, just they went up and bought all the businesses, right? Because everybody got a
But
coupon, but everybody's like, what am I going to do with this coupon? I'm an owner of a business, so who cares, right?
yeah, and they didn't know what to do with it. But the
Yeah,
tragedy of these things, right, is that there was no global reset. There was still countries where they had these reserve currencies where you could come in and basically buy everything up for pennies, right?
yeah,
But in the World of Warcraft patch, you can't do that. It'd be the equivalent of going like, hey, there's this new patch, but anybody who pays $50,000 to Blizzard can get all
yeah,
the best items straight away and own this
yeah,
new world,
yeah,
right? Um, and if none of the players have that money, but one guy does, or a few guys do, then they become the oligarchs of the new system, right?
yeah, yeah,
And in many ways, when you have these revolutions, that's why you end up seeing the economies getting really, really closed, because they go, no, I'm not going to let these people that control the financial system come in and buy up everything, right?
yeah,
Um, and that's why when people talk about Russia, they say, hey, when the Soviet Union first collapsed, and there was Yeltsin there and Gorbachev, and um, the American financiers had open access, the IMF had open access to all the resources, all the companies in Russia. Russia wasn't considered an enemy, right? The moment Putin came in and said, hey, hang on, sorry, but you don't have access, Shell and Exxon, right? This has to be a local company that does this stuff. Suddenly he was a problem, right? And if you look at North Korea, why, I'm in East Germany at the moment, and um, my wife's parents tell me that, hey, the East Germans didn't want they were on the street, her parents took part in the protests. They wanted like a fairer government, right? Something that represented them more. They wanted more freedom. But they said that nobody said that they wanted to become, they weren't sure, they didn't have that discussion yet whether or not Germany should become one country again. Maybe East Germany could have been its own country,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you walk around Leipzig now, Dresden, whatever, and there's still, from what I hear, right, I might be wrong, but from what I hear from many, many sources, is that basically everything here just got bought up by the West. So people are still renting their apartments here, but now they're paying money to landlords that live in Frankfurt or Munich, right?
yeah,
Porsche, BMW, Opel, Volkswagen, right? They come over here and buy all the cheap land and set up factories here, um, which is good for the locals, right? Like they get jobs, but they don't get
yeah,
ownership.
yeah,
Um, so it is interesting that when you do have this reset, right? Like who then is able to come in and buy everything up cheap? Because in game you can control that, but in real life you
yeah,
can't.
yeah. I don't think that's possible. There's no way to, there's always going to be someone who has an advantage.
Yeah.
Like even with Bitcoin, right? If everybody now says, oh, we're going to this new Bitcoin financial system, whatever, the the guys who first started mining Bitcoin, they've got an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones who first knew about it and expended back then, I don't think it was a lot of energy that you needed. You could run it on your home computer, but if you did that, you were able to like get quite a few of these, right? Of course, there's lots of
Yeah.
risk and uncertainty, and that should be rewarded to a certain degree, but still, it's not a level playing field. Like it's not that, there'd be like 8 billion Bitcoin and all that every of the 8 billion people in the world own is everybody gets one Bitcoin, right? That's not
Yeah. No,
how it's
no,
going to be.
no. Yeah. But at the moment, I feel the biggest dissatisfaction people have is not really that the wealth is unfairly distributed, but it's more the fact that there's unfair rules in place for people in different strata of the social economic spectrum, right? So when you see that people, working class people have to pay these amounts of taxes, right? And then you see rich people just parking their assets offshore and never needing to take much risk to keep getting rewarded. I think that's the issue, right? It's the lack of the skin in the game for the people that are higher up in the social hierarchy. Like there's no real way for you to lose your money when you reach a certain amount, right?
Yeah.
And you can then start buying everything up. I think that's the part where it really rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, but yeah, but that, I guess that also doesn't happen in game, right? That's more of an out game, real world problem, right?
Well, they do say that, if a currency system in game, if that happens and people stop playing, like when certain accounts get so strong that they can just farm money without needing to do anything, right? They just I remember playing a game once called MU Online. I don't know. It's like just down. It's like everything's online, right? You download the game from the internet back in the day. That was like, whoa, crazy. I don't need to buy a CD.
Never heard of that.
And yeah, and anyway, to release your spells or whatever, right? You just need to press the space bar.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing is you just get enough good items, right? That has this, I don't know, I can't remember what item it was, but basically allowed you to have like an area of effect of damage, right? And you just buy good enough armor and you just park yourself in this ever spawning area with monsters, right?
Yeah.
And you just
Press that one
put
button.
something on the space bar with like an eraser or something, and then you just go have lunch, and then you come back and you're rich, right?
You're rich, yeah.
Which is kind of it's like a risk-free way of getting resources, and
yeah.
I think that's the current issue that and people started quitting the game. Like it was so addictive, but once you got to that level, it was boring, right?
Yeah. But both quitted the game, right? So that's interesting. Like in a case where, like in the real world, the wealthy, they wouldn't quit the game.
No, because they're playing another game.
Yeah.
They're
There's
playing
like no
the game
limit
that
to
involves
leveling
Panama
up.
coin.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no limit to leveling up, right? If you're like super rich, you fly to space or something like that, right? And then if you get even richer than that, you try something else. You level up, and there's no limit.
You go to
levels.
Mars.
Yeah, you do that. I don't know, but for the poor, I say poor, or the normal people, they could quit the game. They could go to a different country and try stuff there. I don't know. Yeah.
And I guess many people have, right? Like you don't have countries like Australia or Singapore or the US.
Yeah.
Like those countries, basically it was people saying, hey, I don't like this game anymore. I'm going to play a new one, right?
Yeah. I mean, every single Australian, except for the few natives.
Left. Yeah. And now they're forced to play another game.
Yeah, they're leaving.
Yeah. It's really crazy. And yeah, so I don't know. I think we've touched on most of the interesting points. I'm sure there are others out there, but just wanted to say again that it really blew my mind reading this article. So really, thanks for sharing it. Everyone should get subscribe to this newsletter. We'll put that in the show notes too.
Yeah, or read the article. That's a good first step. If you've
Yeah,
made it this far, definitely.
Read that article, watch that 12-minute video.
Yeah, put everything in the show notes.
If anyone knows anybody that's a in-game currency designer, and if they've listened to this and might want to come, we'd love to talk to them.
Yeah. We'd
hear
like
what
to
they have to
specifically
say.
know why the cap on a currency is a bad thing in game.
Yeah, exactly. Because that would be the closest thing to, thinking about, hey, what if we in the real world had a cap, right?
Yeah.
If we that had flat balance sheets,
Yeah.
how would that world look like?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and we don't have Lovis here to plug anything, so
Yeah.
we'll just do like a really
Maybe he can cut
shoddy
in a plug
non-Lovis
from a
effort.
different one.
Yeah, come to the
Just
yeah.
joking.
Maybe we suck too badly, but yeah, come to the Tokenomics DAO. We're on Discord, Substack. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Yeah, I think we'd really appreciate people coming in and commenting and maybe telling us, adding to the conversation, telling us where we might have been mistaken, or maybe adding to what we've spoken about. Yeah, we're really interested in seeing where all of this is going. So every perspective is welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
All right, Flo, thanks so much. I'm going to go get some breakfast.
And I'll get dinner. This podcast was not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly educational and is not investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice. Talk to your accountant, do your own research. None of this is legal advice. This podcast is strictly educational. Talk to your lawyer.